All right, it's media day. We are talking 21-6A as we inch closer to the start of the season, which is about less than a month away. We're joined by Trey Herrmann, the head coach at Fort Bend Austin. Coach, we're talking about this Fort Bend district where you guys let an outsider in the last couple of years. You let George Ranson. I didn't see no Fort Bend in front of it, but we got
Yeah,
rid of them, and now it's
that's right.
all Fort Bend teams. Talk about it's I talk these districts with coaches all the time, but when you have a district where you're so familiar with every other team, how do you kind of prepare for a schedule? I guess the only real thing is you have to find one more non-district game than you did the last couple of years.
Yeah, I just had to pick up one more game, and as far as familiarity within the district, in the coaching profession these days, coordinators are moving jobs pretty regularly, and so there is, while there's familiarity, there's also some changes in those particular positions. So you got to kind of pay attention early in the season to see if they've changed things and adapted to what a new coordinator's brought in, or maybe they got a different grouping of kids that they're trying to do some different things with. So you kind of have an idea of everybody, but at the same time, every team is different every year.
Well, this year, let's talk about last year. Last year, the Bulldogs were oh man, they were just knocking on that door, just about in the postseason. And as we mentioned, George Rance is gone, and that was one of the teams that opens up a spot. You guys have a veteran bunch. How do you feel about your chances of getting in the postseason and maybe even challenging those big dogs from Ridgepoint who don't seem to want to give up the district title at any time soon?
I feel good about our team. And like I said before, every year, every team is different. So one of the biggest things we can't do as a team is focus on last year. Yes, we made some good strides last year and competed well, and we're just one game off of getting into the postseason. But we also have to understand those games we won last year, they're all the games this year. And so we've got to again, reestablish ourselves. We got to go out and compete, and then continue to make improvements there. But as you mentioned, we do have a veteran bunch. I think that bodes very well for us. We're extremely young on offense last year. Started something like six sophomores. So that'll help us a lot. I think being able to move the ball and defensively, we brought back just about all of our defense guys from last year, with the exception of the defensive line. I look forward to competing. I'm sure that all the other coaches in the district feel the same about their squads as well. So, we'll just have to go out there, put our hard hats on, and get to work.
Some of these kids that you brought back that you're quite familiar with, right? Talk about coaching your sons and how they have a major part on both sides of the ball. Just talk about how that dynamic is and how difficult it is not to go home with that stuff. I'm sure your wife has a lot to do with, hey, keep that stuff on the field.
Yeah, well, we tend to convene back in my office, and we'll eat after the games and kind of talk through some things before we go on. My one of them is on the dark side of the ball on that offensive side, and so me being a defensive guy, trying to understand, he wants to throw the ball every down,
Right.
and him trying to understand me being a defensive guy and being a bit more conservative than that. Um, it's an interesting challenge on that part of it, but getting to be on the sideline and to coach them, it's been very special. My oldest will be a senior this year, and he plays safety, which was my position as well, and it's what I coach as well. So I mean, and getting to interact with him on a daily basis has been pretty special. And what's nice about that is, he's almost to the point now where he finishes my sentences. I don't have to coach much in the secondary because he makes adjustments before I have to yell anything out. He's got it down pretty well packed. And then the other one being on the other side of the ball, being the quarterback. I mean, the steps that he made this offseason as far as maturity and understanding what leadership is has been huge. And I think it'll pay huge dividends for our team. But it's been fun. I had another one this year. I'll have incoming freshman will be an outside linebacker for us. So got a lot of Hermans here on campus.
Nice. A lot of Hermans. Uh, let's talk about where your eyes have kind of gone during spring ball and maybe as we hone into the first couple practices before the season, first couple weeks. I mean, where are you looking at for some people to step up? I know usually I ask this question to coaches and immediately it's in the trenches, and maybe the same thing with you, offensive defensive line. You can have all the great skill position players you want, but if they can't stand on their feet because they're getting hit, then that's a problem. Where besides maybe the trenches, where do you think you guys are looking for people to step up?
Well, not to be redundant, but yeah, the D line in particular for us, just because we replaced all those guys from last year, we do some different things up front than a traditional defensive line does, and so there are some different things that we ask them to be able to do. So that was really my eye focus early in the spring, is just to see who was going to be able to step up and take those spots and who could make plays and that sort of thing. The other thing for us is really with the receiving core. We're putting a little bit more load on them this year, and so we want to see how they handled that. Everything looks good on air, as I always tell those guys. How are you going to respond when you got to make that catch between two defenders, or where maybe it's contested and that sort of thing? And so that's really what we kind of paid attention to in the spring, to make sure that those guys could handle that load. Because as it's not what we know as coaches is what our kids can handle. So that was really kind of where we were focused on.
Perfect. Let's talking a little bit more about the district. I mean, in seasons past in this Fort Bend district, there's been certain tiers, and Richport and Hightower are at that top tier, and then the other teams kind of fight through there. Sometimes Travis drifts up in there, up and down. How close, or how do you feel your Austin team is from kind of jumping into that tier and challenging for that district title?
It's going to take some work. I always, when Coach Arrow was here, we kind of always joke that there's no skipping steps, right? And I think the step has always been, you got to lose close, and then you got to kind of win big. And we're at that kind of third tier, right, where we won a lot of close games last year. Now, where when we are the better team, we've got to be dominant. When we are just below or at level, that's when we've got to be able to kind of push beyond. And a lot of that comes down to being able to win every play. It can't be a situation where we've got a 7-point lead on the scoreboard, and all of a sudden offensively we're okay with taking the wrong step, or having a bad path back spot, or maybe missing a read at the quarterback spot, whatever the case may be. We've got to be on point every single play. And when we do have a misstep, then we got to kind of reconvene, stay composed, and then win the next one. And I think that's really the key component. We got to get our eyes off the scoreboard entirely and get to where we dominate those individual plays, because your best ones you mentioned on that next level, the Ridge Points, the Hightower, the Travis, that's what they're doing, and that's what's kept them on that level.
I guess finally you're going to have to miss those first 5 games being on the field with a little bit of suspension. How hard is that going to be for your players, because you're coaching them every day, letting them know what happens? So you have to say a little something on that extra Thursday practice saying, hey, I'm not going to be there, but just remember your keys, remember what we tell you, listen to the other coaches. How difficult is that going to be for you?
The very first day that it came out from the meeting, the kids were down a little bit on it. We talked about, adversity and how it's an opportunity. And that's kind of the way we're going to approach it. And so I'm a big Jocko Willink fan, and, kind of followed his podcast and read all the books and everything. So I had to, sit my own self down and say, all right, can't coach the first 5 games. And so good. And then what that means is now I've got to do a better job of coaching my coaches and making sure that even though I'm not physically going to be present, exactly what we would have done if I was there is what takes place. And so all it does is it forces me to do a better job of meetings. It forces me to do a better job within assigning leadership roles during practices, so that nobody even notices. And that would be probably the greatest compliment to myself ever, if nobody noticed I wasn't there, because that means the program is running on all cylinders, and we're just kind of, we're able to overcome anything that's thrown our way. I think the biggest challenge for me is, like I said, it's my son's senior season, and I don't get to watch his first 5 games. So that's a little bit of a challenge, but I think as a program, we're going to be able to overcome. Our kids have been extremely resilient all off season, and I think they'll rise to the challenge.
Well, I hope so too. I hope that the Austin rises to the challenge of making the postseason this year. Looking forward to it. Season's right around the corner, Coach. I appreciate you joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate it.